Guys, just before we get started, if you're loving the podcast, can you please go leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, and please make sure that you subscribe on whatever channel that you listen to us on. It helps us out dramatically.
And so for me, networking isn't about getting in environments where you're talking to hundreds of people. For me, it's about strategic networking. Who are the 1 or 2 or 3 people that could make the biggest difference to my trajectory and my development and my business development over the next 3 years? And then be strategic and dedicate more time, more effort, more thought to developing 2, 3, 4, 5 relationships than doing the traditional networking of getting in rooms where you're handing out business cards.
Yeah, we'll golden, baby girl, we'll golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden. They're about to see us glow, cause we're golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden.
Jack, welcome to the podcast. Straight into it.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here.
We were just having a bit of a chat, and I think it's a good chat to have, for the audience as 100%. Well, just around obviously what we're doing with media, and you just started your own podcast as well. Obviously, there's you have some that are branded around the entourage and so on, but this is obviously something that an endeavor for yourself that obviously attaches from a personal brand perspective, but that's really exciting.
Yeah, I was just saying before we started shooting that I really love what you're doing in this space because, I mean, I believe in 2022 and beyond, every business should be viewing themselves as a media company. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether you're a dentist, whether you're a retailer, whether you're an e-com, whether you're a chiropractor, you're a media company. And so even in our business strategy, audience is at the center of everything else that we do. So we do business coaching and training. We're about to launch an accounting and finance company. I've recently started to invest in luxury real estate and everything that comes with that. And then there'll be other companies that we build, companies that we launch in America. The audience is at the center of absolutely everything. And so I think with all of the knowledge and the wisdom that people are pulling from your podcasts, one of the things that they should be looking at is what you're doing as much as they're listening to what's being said.
It's the age-old trick, isn't it? Like, and that's how I am. Like, if I'm listening to something, I'm not just listening to it. I'm going, what are they doing? Like,
you're observing it as a proprietor.
100%. Just a quick question before we obviously dive in, but do you think that like what we just talked about, the audience first, that kind of earned media, to start off with, has changed from, say, a product-orientated company maybe 10 years ago? Or do you think it's always been that way? It's now more obvious. So, what I mean by that is, like, I feel like maybe 5 years ago and beyond, it was very build the product to meet the need, product to meet the need, right? And you always have to gauge the audience and so on. But I feel like now it's build the audience, then build the product based on what those needs are, if that makes sense. Do you think that it's, let's say the next 10 years, we're kind of turning a page in the business, life cycle. Do you think that's a change or no?
100% it is. I think that 10 years ago, I was telling people they were media companies 10 years ago. Whatever business you're in, you're a media company. Whatever business you're in, you're an education company. Educate your audience, educate your market. That's how you become an industry leader. And so that's something I've been saying for 15 years. The only difference is 10 years ago, if you did it, you were such a front runner.
Yeah.
You were so differentiated. Whereas today, it's just a must.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're behind. And so there's still equal degrees of opportunity in building an audience that knows you, likes you, trusts you, values you. It's just that it's become even more important.
It's so true. It's almost, and Gary Vee is one of those guys. He just he leads from the front and he's always first, right? At whatever the next thing is. But I think even with like VaynerMedia, he was always content first, build the audience, and then VaynerMedia, like you mentioned, with even what you guys are doing, is like the centerpiece to what you can do. And the more powerful that centerpiece gets, the greater the opportunity around it,
Totally,
which is unbelievable.
Gary's a really good example of audience first. The reason I laugh is I laugh when Gary says, I create this content and I don't sell anything. And for me, that's ironic because he sells everything.
Yeah.
From wine to merch to keynotes to masterminds to NFTs. The whole business strategy is premised off build an audience and add a lot of value, which he does remarkably. And there is a direct throughput to sales in, probably like 8 to 10 different channels in what he's doing.
I think it's like, it's that what we just talked about, when you're observing him, that you can say that you're not selling anything, but anyone that knows anything about business knows what you're doing. Right.
Or anyone with their fucking eyes open can see what you're doing.
100%. But I think the thing about it is that you don't, you don't mind that he's selling everything because there's so much value before the sale that you're like, cool, sell me whatever you want to sell me.
Right, exactly. I think as a culture there's a whole stigma around sales, which I fundamentally disagree with. I view it as build an audience, and then the North Star question is how do we best serve that audience? So there's I'm really glad and supportive that Gary sells wine and keynotes and masterminds and NFTs and merch to his audience. I just think it's funny when people who are selling 8 different things to you tell you they're not selling to you.
It's the 48 laws of power, right? It's kind of like, like that's the playbook of a great entrepreneur, like to play the humble card. I'm not selling you anything, but none of us really care that he's selling anything because he obviously provides so much value.
I love that he is.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the leaders in terms of advancing the space.
100%. All right, so we'll get back on track now. I wanted to start this with your startup story. Right, so we just talked about it. You've been in business for 12 years now with the Entourage. And
started the Entourage 12 years ago. Been in business for about 17, 18 years. Yeah.
I'd love to hear how that started and how you kind of got into that, and then we can even maybe talk about where the business is going now.
Totally. Yeah, so my company prior to the Entourage was a company called MBE, and I started it with an older business partner that had a lot of experience helping small to medium-sized companies raise money from investors, buy businesses, build value to exit businesses. He was that kind of corporate advisor figure.
Yeah.
And we co-founded an organization called MBE to take that level of information and train and coach small business owners on it. Because historically, if you want to raise a decent amount of capital, you go to a PwC or an Ernst & Young and you're cutting a check for $50,000 to get started. And so for a lot of small business owners, the fees and the process was so exorbitant and so onerous that it was prohibitive for them. And so Ruben and I started a training and coaching company that made it more accessible and more affordable. And so MBE became one of Australia's fastest growing companies. We enabled our clients over a couple of years to raise over $300 million from investors, and the success stories that we were producing were significant. People would start with us, and then we trained them and coached them on how to acquire businesses using none of their own money. They'd go buy a business using none of their own money for $4 million, triple the revenue of their company, quadruple the profit of their company in a matter of months. And so just the level of commercial outcomes that we were helping businesses to achieve was really significant. At the time, I was 21, 22, 23, so I was super young. Now, in order to advise companies on that, you need a lot of experience, right? So Ruben brought the experience. Ruben was the talent. I was the person that was, charged with driving the growth of the business, operationalizing the business. And because I couldn't participate in the service delivery or product delivery because I didn't have the experience around capital raising. I mean, I picked it up really quickly, and today capital raising is one of the core commercial capabilities I've developed that's enabled me to get to where I am. But back then, I couldn't. And so, and we got to a point where I maxed out Ruben pretty quick in terms of his capacity. And so I needed to go out and build a team of other advisors. And so, one of the things I think we'll talk about throughout this discussion is, as a CEO or as an entrepreneur, you want to build a business that's not operationally reliant on you. And so at the age of 21, 22, 23, I was forced to build a business upon which I could not participate in the product because I didn't have the expertise. And so I was forced to be a real CEO from a young age. I was forced to build structure, build team, have enough capital. I was forced to engineer an ecosystem that could essentially operate without me, right? And so on the back of that experience, on the back of the growth, on the back of the credibility that it brought us, because MBE helped me develop a bit of a media profile and a bit of a following. And it was really on the back of the success stories that had my attention the most, because we were working with, generally speaking, older, slightly more established companies. And what interested me more than that was working with high growth entrepreneurial organizations. And so I stepped out of the general manager role at MBE and started the Entourage because I wanted to essentially do what we were doing with MBE, but I wanted it to be not just focused on capital raising, but focused on growth.
So there's something that, like, when I heard this, I pricked my ears just then, and it was kind of like, okay, so you're 21, 22, and somehow you've caught the attention of, someone who's obviously extremely prominent in business already.
Right. Do you know Ruben?
No.
Right. So Ruben was and is prominent. Ruben was the founder of Wealth Creator magazine. And so this is a really useful question that you're asking and a real useful story for the audience. That if you're somebody that's looking to surround yourself with people with been there, done that experience, this is going to summarize exactly how you do that. And so Ruben was super prominent. Ruben was the founder of Wealth Creator magazine. Do you?
No.
Before your time?
Before my time. I would have been maybe 14, 15, I reckon.
Right. And so I had been fascinated with entrepreneurship since the age of about 14.
Yeah.
And when I was 14, Wealth Creator magazine was at its prime. It was probably the preeminent entrepreneurial magazine in the country. And they would only put people on the cover. They would only feature entrepreneurs that were self-made. So James Packer was never on the cover of Wealth Creator magazine. Yep. It was John Ilhan from Crazy Johns, who really sadly passed away shortly after. But it was the Mark Borises, the people that were really self-made. And so, many teenage boys have many magazines under their bed. The magazines I had under my bed were Wealth Creator magazines.
Yeah, awesome.
And so I grew up on this and idolized it. And then when Ruben started to do the capital raising thing, he got asked to speak at an event in Melbourne. And I reached out to him and I said, I know you're not from Melbourne, I am. I know you don't have events experience, I do. Do you want me to come along and help you for free? And so this is a key point, right? When you're looking to build and establish a relationship, I posted about this the other day. I was going through my LinkedIn mail and the approaches were just abysmal. I thought it was, every message I was reading was super weird because I struggle to understand how the degree of the lack of thought that people put into their approaches. And so when you're approaching somebody that does not yet know you, or even if they do know you, approach with how you can add value to them. And if you don't know how you can add value to them, fucking research them until you do. And then lead with that. And so I reached out to, I know you're not from Melbourne, I am. I know you don't run events, I do. Do you want me to come along on the night and I'll help you for free? He wrote back and I think he was just, I don't know if he needed the help. I think he was just surprised that someone would send him an email offering it. And he said, yeah, come along. And so I came along and we had about, I can't remember, it was probably about 2,000 people in the room. And this was the first time that Ruben was enrolling people into a weekend program. And he's an exceptional business operator. He was exceptional when it comes to raising money from investors. Terrible when it came to selling from stage. And so afterwards, again, I knew the answer to this question, but after the event, I said to him, who's doing your sales for you on the back of this event? Because there's 2,000 people in this room. 1,990 of them didn't buy anything. Who's following them up afterwards? And he said, no one, which I knew was going to be his answer because he was too busy doing big deals to worry about sales for trainings. And so I said to him, all right, send me the list. The weekend was 2 weeks away in Sydney. Send me the list. I'll call them. Pay me whatever commission you want to. Rock and roll. Anyway, I ended up making him 40 grand over the next 2 weeks. And so, because sales has always been, sales and communication is a strong skill set of mine. And so the original value add was, I'm going to come help you for free. I then identified a need that he needed fulfilling, and I most importantly, particularly Ruben is quite financially motivated. I'm not. It was around identifying a need where I could help him make more money. And so then when a 21-year-old kid made him 40 grand in 2 weeks, who 3 weeks ago he didn't know, that got his attention. And so then he was like, you're on a plane, you're coming to the weekend, and then we're going to have a strategy meeting about how we can do this together.
I feel like that's something, you obviously picked it up early on, but I know for me in my first, say, 4 or 5 years in business, I just didn't pay enough attention to stuff like that.
Right.
But networking, right? And the ability to be an asset to someone and understand that will pay you a future dividend at some point.
Yeah. And I think networking is something that a lot of people, there's a really key distinction to networking that's really important, which is I have no desire to go into a room of 100 people that don't know me and try and meet 70. I'm just not going to do anything with it. And so for me, networking isn't about getting in environments where you're talking to hundreds of people. For me, it's about strategic networking. Who are the 1 or 2 or 3 people that could make the biggest difference to my trajectory and my development and my business development over the next 3 years, and then be strategic and dedicate more time, more effort, more thought to developing 2, 3, 4, 5 relationships than doing the traditional networking of getting in rooms where you're handing out business cards.
Yeah, it's just being able to identify an opportunity, right? So you get to meet somebody who, as you said, potentially could have a huge impact on you, and then move the chess pieces and say, okay, how can I be an asset to this person? And I'm going to do that without wanting anything in return because I know at some point that return will come naturally.
100%.
And it's funny, like when we started this podcast, that's what we had in mind. Yeah. And when I say that, I mean being how does our podcast be an asset to our guests? Because we actually focus more on our guests.
Right.
And one of the biggest things that, like, internally, our team, we want to be the best performing pieces of content on our guest feed, no matter what. That's our goal.
Yeah, I love that.
It's not,
that's awesome.
It's not, let's just go viral or let's try to even create value for the audience. Like, we know that that's going to be a natural occurrence, but we know that if we're going to climb the ladder and we're going to perform well, we have to be the best performing piece of content on our guest feed. And if we can do that, we are an asset to them. Totally. And then that's how we grow.
Yes.
And we had that from the very beginning. That's something I identified, but it's the same principle. It's, we know, okay, these are the people that are going to have a huge impact on our business.
Yes.
The biggest impact, we think. How do we be an asset to them?
Yeah, and add value to them. Yeah, it's a complete... It's flipping the traditional thinking on its head.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. And then so that's the story of how the Entourage was born. And then over 10 years, you're able to build what I said to you before is what I see as the most trusted business coaching development company in Australia, and you would be able to argue around the world as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the Entourage is the response to the Entourage from the gate was like overwhelming, and I mean it was born out of frustration for a lack of, I think business people need access to entrepreneurs and business owners who are 5 to 10 years further down the path than they are, have been there, done that experience, and can shortcut your development, right? And so for me, I've always been somebody to engage coaches. I've always done a lot of training. And I think it's such a powerful principle to be able to shortcut what took somebody else decades to work out into months, literally. And so, today, as you say, we're Australia's largest business coaching and training provider for small to medium-sized business owners. And the integrity of just how effective we are at molding and developing entrepreneurs. Our members go from doing $1 million a year to $1 million a month. That's not uncommon. We were talking about Jai before we got 100%. On. You had dinner with him the other night. Jai started with us. He was doing $1.5 million. He had a team of 10. And he was working 80 hours a week. Jai has for those of you that don't know Jai Boehm, he has a surface spray company. And so whether something needs painting or an adhesive surface over it, his company goes and applies it. And so him and his business partner were going out, and from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. they were hands-on tools doing the spraying. And then from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. they were in the office doing business development. And they had this seesaw between deliver work, generate work, deliver work, generate work, doing 1.5 with a team of 10. Jai's been with us for 4 years now. He developed and embedded a sales process into his company that he could delegate to other people can sell for him. He went from being the technician doing everything to being the leader entrepreneur where he's shaping and architecting everything but not needing to do everything. We started to build a holistic company across all the 6 elements of his business, across marketing, sales, product development and delivery, operations, finance, and people. And so you take this really great and capable entrepreneur and develop a strategy that's going to unlock their challenges, that's going to help them achieve their objectives. Today, Jai's doing $20 million a year. He's got a team of 100 people plus. His profit margins have gone up, and he doesn't do any delivery anymore.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so it is crazy. It's amazing what business owners are capable of when they have the right strategy, when they have the right plan of execution, and when they have the right people around them. Right? Like one of the things Jai was saying recently, when he was doing 1.5 and he was working 80-hour weeks, he said, we just couldn't see a way out of it. Like, we just felt stuck. We just thought we were always going to be there. And I think a lot of business owners spend a lot of their lives feeling stuck. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm spending so much time doing what I need to do. I want to employ more people. I want to work on more meaningful things. I want to do all this, but I don't have any surplus cash in order to do that. I don't have any extra time in which to create that. And so I'm stuck between this rock and a hard place. And our core message to business owners is you are never stuck. There is always a play. And in the case of Jai, or in the case of most businesses, I mean, unless you're severely distressed, in the case of most businesses, the play isn't that hard.
I think that's a good road into one of the first topics that I wanted to chat to you about, and that was, I think, the toughest thing that small business owners and talking from experience, but also, we obviously have an amazing audience and they talk to us a lot, but going from that small business, that really kind of startup business from, say, anywhere from 5 to 10 employees, and then being able to take that to that, 30, 40, 50 plus. What are the biggest lessons that you learned going through that? But also you obviously see so much of that as well.
Right.
Like, for someone listening, what's the advice you can give them?
Yeah. The journey of the entrepreneur is relatively universal. And so, from being in business for 17, 18 years now and starting and growing, several 8, 9-figure companies, investing in companies that span retail, luxury real estate, biotech, tech, property, and as well as, in the entourage, we have a community of 550,000 business owners as well. And so I've had a really strong breadth and depth of exposure to the journey of the entrepreneur over the last couple of decades. And the journey goes something like this. Entrepreneur starts business, right? And as entrepreneurs, we have a good understanding of the marketplace. We have a good empathy for the consumer that we want to help. And at a high level, we're really good at developing a product or a service to address that market demand and to speak to that consumer need. And so in the beginning, a business is all about triangulating those 3 forces and creating something out of nothing. You are an alchemist. And what drives the growth of the business in the early years comes really naturally to us as entrepreneurs. It's drive, it's improvise, it's break through brick walls. There are no resources, so fucking get resourceful. It's cover up the stuff ups along the way. It's drive harder, right? This is an entrepreneur in their element, and the business is of such a size that one person can wrap their arms around it. What inevitably happens is the business grows and the business grows and the business grows and the business grows, and you're now doing more sales. You've got a larger customer base that are less forgiving of mistakes than they used to be. There are more operations. There's more operational complexity. There's more money coming in. There's more money going out. The team has grown. And our mode of operation in that startup phase was, when the business needs something, I'm just going to do it. And so the business needs 1 unit of output. I'm just going to put in 1 unit of input. That's a really unsustainable strategy as the organization grows, because every time the business needs something, if you're the one that needs to personally contribute to it, that's the path that leads to 60, 70, 80, 90-hour weeks, right? Because business needs more, I'll just do more. And so this is where we find the entrepreneur. They're buried in spreadsheets. They're putting out daily fires. They're worrying about cash flow. They're trying to write systems and processes because they think that's what's going to get their team more productive. We've taken someone that is brilliant at leading from the front and guiding and shaping and architecting and forging new ground, and we've buried them in operational detail. They've become, the entrepreneurs become operations manager at best or admin assistant at worst. And there's 3 things that are wrong with that. We're not good at it. It's not why we started a business. And it's not our highest and best use to what we can contribute to the company. And so the paradigm shift is this. Business owners have to understand that if you resonate with that scenario, what got you to where you are is not going to get you to where you need to be. As business goes through life cycles, there's different stages and different phases, and nowhere are you called to operate differently to as great of a degree between startup and scale up. If you're bursting at the seams, this is going to be the largest shift in how you need to think and how you need to operate along your entire growth journey. And the reason for that is this. When you're doing, your first 100 grand, you have no leverage. You have no leverage. And so that's why 1 unit of output requires 1 unit of input from you. What you want to start doing is building out structure. And what do I mean by structure? I mean people and processes and technology that can get things done on your behalf. And what you want to start doing is building a company that can be operationally driven without you being operationally involved. And so we build an engine. The entrepreneur can put in 1 unit of input and out pops 1,000 units of output. That's leverage. Leverage is the ratio between inputs and outputs in any given system. And so in startup, you have no leverage. And this is the number one fundamental business principle that startup and scale up business owners have to understand if they ever want to unlock further growth, which is it comes down to your leverage ratio. How much leverage is your business providing you? And this also points to the number one misconception that I find people have of businesses and business owners have of businesses, which is, if I'm a business owner, it is my job to market, sell, and deliver a product. And it's not. If you're a business owner, while you might need to do that initially because you don't have the resources to employ people or structure, while you might need to do that initially, you want to get to a point where you are not marketing, selling, and delivering a product. You are building a business that can market, sell, and deliver a product without you.
And so that's amazingly put. Do you think that the hardest part about that, or maybe one of the biggest problems that people face, is how they price their service relative to what it costs to produce that, or product as well? So margins, because obviously, bringing people into the company is one of the hardest things to do, getting the right people. But it's also, especially in the early days, you're driving a business forward, you're trying to generate revenue. But then you have to take that revenue, reinvest into people that can get you that leverage. So is that something that you see people that's the brick wall they keep running into, or is it more than that?
Pricing is definitely one of the components. What and this is the rock and the hard place. It's like, Jack, I've got a team of 10 people. I'd love to be less on the tools and more off the tools and being more strategic. How do I do that? And the answer is by placing a greater emphasis on revenue generation. And I use the word revenue here very purposefully as opposed to profit, right? Our goal is to build a profitable company and achieve profitable growth. However, right now, in this scenario, it's not about maximizing net margin. It's about maximizing cash and revenue through the door that you can deploy and invest into the organization, which is going to give you a higher return on investment than any other investment you might be able to make if you were to pull that money out of the business, right? And so the first thing to understand is that your business is the best investment vehicle on the planet. There's no other asset class that's going to give you the returns that your business will. So don't be trying to pull money out of it until and unless it is growing sustainably without your operational involvement. Then you start taking divvies. Until that point, don't. What happens is business owners in that early stage, they get stuck in their comfort zone. Their comfort zone is often product development and delivery or service development and delivery. And so, or tinkering around with the operations. On average, small business owners spend about 10% of their time on sales and marketing. We encourage business owners to spend 80% of their time on sales and marketing. And so the first thing is improve the quality, not even the quantity yet. Improve the quality of your marketing, improve the quality of your sales process, which can be done in a space of 1 to 2 months. That will generate you more leads. It will convert you more sales without doing any extra work. All we've done is improve the quality of your marketing and sales. Now, because your marketing and your branding is better and because your sales process is far superior than it used to be, if you want to increase prices now, you can do that as well. And so then we've got more leads coming in that are being converted to a higher degree. Our average dollar per sale is going up, right? And so now we've got surplus cash flow. Now we've got surplus revenue that we can start deploying against other resources. Whether that's people that you can delegate to or whether that's structure. And so that was true for Jai, right? This is I was going to say it's textbook, although that's the wrong metaphor because you won't find this in any textbook. Yeah. But for us, it's textbook. It's get the entrepreneur more focused on marketing and sales, increase prices if they want to, use that surplus cash to deploy against the resources that they need to do less hands-on tools work and start operating more strategically.
Is there a pathway that you see works best for this then? So you talked about it, like drive marketing and so on, but I'm more talking about obviously the business owner is going to, as a business owner in a startup, you're going to wear multiple hats and those hats will probably change quite a bit as you build out the structure that you talked about, such as people. So is there a pathway that you see works best or is it individual to the business? So what I mean is more around, should someone be trying to build out their marketing team first and then they go into, another role? Like how does the entrepreneur know what hat to wear as they're building out that structure that you talked about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so in order to answer that with the degree of depth that it requires, let's talk about what's the fundamental blueprint for every single company. And that is that every business has 6 elements. Every business does 6 things. Doesn't matter whether you're business to business, business to consumer, online, offline, retail, service-based, doesn't matter. Every business does 6 things. The first element is marketing. We go out and we generate interest and attention in our marketplace. The second element is sales. We turn that interest and attention into paid customers. The third element is product development and delivery. And I use the term product inclusive of service-based businesses because even if you're service-based business, you should view it as a product such that we can bottle its magic and scale it. So product development and delivery. The fourth element is operations, the internal workings of your business. The fifth element is finance, managing and enhancing the money game. And the sixth element is the element that brings those first 5 functions to life. The sixth element is people. And so where should an entrepreneur's attention go to in their company? What's most common is I'm buried in product development and delivery. And remember, we're using that term inclusive of service-based businesses as well, because if anything, this dynamic is more true of service-based businesses. I'm buried in there. And so the first play is enhance the marketing, enhance the sales, generate more customers, generate more sales, more revenue without doing any extra work. So not increasing quantity, we're just increasing quality. use that surplus cash flow to backfill yourself in product development and delivery to give you a little bit of altitude, such that you can focus more on marketing and sales. You then start focusing more on marketing and sales. That fuels the growth of the product development and delivery. The business starts to grow. Usually that's the unlock. However, there are exceptions to that. And so if that scenario doesn't describe you, then the best question to ask yourself is, across those 6 elements, marketing, sales, product, ops, finance, people, where is your biggest problem area and where is your biggest opportunity area? Because for some businesses, their scenario will be the opposite of what I just described. I just described an entrepreneur being buried in product development and delivery. A lot of entrepreneurs are really drive growth focused. They're really focused on marketing and sales, and their brand and their marketing and their sales is actually stronger than their product development and delivery. Mm-hmm. And so they're driving growth, but they've just got a growing base of unhappy customers because they're yet to give enough attention to servicing existing customers. They're so focused on winning new business. And so in that instance, it's the opposite. It's about developing out your product development and delivery function to a point where your customers are really, really happy, such that we can achieve more organic growth from the foundational customer base. And so it will depend on the strengths and weaknesses of the business. However, those 2 different plays will capture 96% of companies.
It's and I can see how relative it would be to the type of company as well. Like,
right.
I'm thinking service-based businesses would be, get the product right, make sure you get that right, because it is going to take up a lot of the time, especially in the early days. And then once you get that right, you can start building a little bit of word of mouth. Hopefully that kind of brings in that surplus that you need to then go full marketing and sales orientated and drive it even further and bring more people in. So yeah, that definitely resonates and makes a lot of sense.
The thing with the majority of service-based business owners is they're spending 90% of the time delivering the service. And so again, this comes back to the paradigm shift of, yes, that will be necessary in the beginning, right? That is necessary in the beginning. However, your ultimate intent should not be, if you're buried in service development, delivery, or product development and delivery, you don't have a business, you have a job. And that's not why you started the business. Even if you love what you do from a service perspective, like you're a PT, you love delivering PT sessions, great. Let's build a company that can scale beyond you, and then you can deliver the PT because you want to, not because you have to. At least we've unlocked all of the growth constraints for your team and your customers for everybody to get a better service on the way through. If your business is forever dependent on you, everybody suffers. You suffer, the business suffers, the team suffers, the customer suffers.
Yeah, that's kind of why I mentioned before around margins, right? Because like the margin problem will only escalate that problem that you just talked about. Like if you're underpricing and you don't have the margin there, you don't have a choice but to sit there and deliver that product, like, because you don't have enough margin there to bring in the structure that you're talking about to get someone to actually deliver the product, which is that's what's going to give you, the entrepreneur, the most time to go and focus on these other things. Right.
You're talking about gross margin.
Yeah, gross margins.
Understood. Yeah, when we often talk margin, we're talking net margin. Yes, 1,000,000%. You need to be able to. You have to be selling your product or service for more than it costs you to build it and deliver it.
Is there a sweet spot there that you know?
The sweet spot is raise your fucking prices. Because here's the thing. When you're working for another company, it's really easy to value what that company's doing to an appropriate degree. When a business owner steps into their own business, they start to undervalue the product because they undervalue themselves. And so I don't think I have ever had a strategic discussion with a small to medium-sized company that couldn't and shouldn't raise their prices by 20 or 30%. I'm trying to think of exceptions to that, right? Even for businesses that have previously competed on price, it's like we've always wedged ourselves into the market being the cheapest. It's like, okay, how about we now wedge ourselves into the market by being accessible? And so we're not we can still compete on price, but we're not going to claim to be the cheapest anymore. That was useful to get you to your first 500 grand or your first 5 million, but right now we cannot go further as long as this is part of our core value proposition. So because the economics aren't working, so we need to change that, right? The thing to understand about pricing is that, let's say you currently sell something for $10. And let's say your net margin in your company is 20%. So every time you sell something for $2, it goes through our COGS, we've got our gross profit, goes through our operational expenses, and we've then got our net profit. And our net profit is 20%. So $2 every time we sell something for $10. If we increase your price from $10 to $12, and it doesn't matter whether it's 10 to 12 or 1,000 to 1,200 or 10,000 to 12,000, it scales proportionally. We haven't just increased it by $2. We've doubled your net margin profit, at the bottom, on the bottom line. And so what a lot of business owners don't fully appreciate is just how much profitability uplift there is for every dollar that you increase your price by. The same is true of cost savings. Every time you cut $1 of cost, it goes straight to the bottom line. Every time you increase your price by $1, it goes straight to the bottom line. And so there's a lot of freedom to be gained by looking at those two levers.
I think it just stresses the importance of financial literacy as well, especially in the early days. Like, you only understand that if you understand margins. Guys, if you're loving this episode, make sure to take a screenshot, give us a tag, or even take a photo if you're watching it. Give us a tag, help spread the love. It helps us out dramatically. Guys, I've owned businesses now for 10 years, and let me tell you, it is hard enough as it is. Business insurance is just one of those things you don't want to have to worry about. I've been with BizCover now for 6 years, and they make it seamless. No hassle, no paperwork, and you can get insured instantly. So it's tax time. Do yourself a favor, go see if you can save some money and get a better deal. How often do you talk to a new business owner who has no idea what that even means? And I think that's the biggest one for me that I always look at. If I can improve my cost, to produce a service, or the ratio between the price and the COGS, naturally profitability is going to skyrocket.
Absolutely.
So because operational expenses and even marketing to an extent you can fix.
Yes.
So they do scale. So that's definitely something that, even in businesses that I've run, I've noticed as well. So I think financial literacy in the early days is, even if you suck at it, you just got to spend time with it. Get a good accountant, someone who's proactive, who's willing to sit there and they're willing to teach and have the conversations with you is just so priceless.
Yes. And my advice to, let's say you between $0 and $1 million in annual revenue. And again, revenue isn't the point, profit is. But if we just talk to the size of the company, $1 million revenue, you want to understand the basics, right? Like, one of the things that we work on with our 7 and our 8-figure clients, so we've got a program called Elevate, which works exclusively with 7 and 8-figure business owners. So companies doing anywhere from 1 to, let's say, 50 mil generally, is developing the financial visibility throughout the organization and understanding the core drivers of the organization's success. So getting really clear on what are your objectives and your key results, what are your KPIs, what's driving the success of each of the functions of your business, having that culminate in 3-way forecasts. So you've got an accurate P&L, an accurate balance sheet, an accurate cash flow statement, both looking backwards and looking forward. And that gives us all the visibility we need to make more financially informed decisions and start finely tuning your organization. Mm-hmm. From 0 to $1 million, you don't need to do that. And you don't want to get distracted by that. Remember we spoke earlier about, in the early days, business owners get stuck in their comfort zone. Usually it's product delivery or tinkering around with operations. Tinkering around with financial detail can also be a bit of a distraction. I want the business owner to understand the fundamentals. How much am I selling it for? What are my COGS? What are my operational expenses? What's my net profit? And within there, what's also my gross profit? So there's 5 numbers, right? Yeah. Now, there's going to be a bunch of numbers that feed into that. But if you can have a grasp and a good handle on that, you want to have a handle on that, then go market and sell. We'll come back to developing its sophistication and the modeling and the forward-looking forecasts, all of that when you get closer to the $1 million mark. And so I think it's about, I think what you're saying is 100% true. It's about knowing the fundamentals of your economics in the beginning and then enhancing the sophistication of that as the organization grows.
So true. So true. We're going to take a bit of a shift now, because I think one of the most interesting things from following the Entourage and your own journey, from afar and obviously absorbing all the content and so on. And you did mention that your role has changed quite a few times. But for you becoming a leader, and obviously that's a journey. It's not like one day you flick a switch and it happens, but it's a journey, right? I'd love to hear about some of the things that you've personally had to change. Some of the behaviors, some of the characteristics, the kind of looking deep inside over the journey to become that leader, as the business has required you in different I guess, roles, and how you've become the leader you are now.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think that early on in one's career, and this was certainly true of me, is you can have an overinflated sense of arrogance that's masking an insecurity. And so what that means is you can be showy to a degree, but you actually avoid having the hard conversations because you don't yet have the confidence or the centered strength to do so. And I see that in a lot of entrepreneurs, is there's not a lot of confidence, authentic confidence. Sometimes there's conditional and external confidence, like I've made a lot of money and I drive a Maserati and therefore I'm confident, but they're not. And how they mask that is arrogance. How we mask that is arrogance. And the antidote to that, the journey from that place, is to do the inner work on yourself. Part of your personal growth will occur just as a natural byproduct of you maturing as the years progress. And so you get some growth just organically, which is awesome. It's almost like growth. You don't really, if
you're not aware of it.
You want to be slightly aware. You want to be, because there's some people that don't grow as the years progress at all organically, right? Because they're completely unaware and they're completely unconscious. And so you need to have a certain degree of consciousness, a certain degree of self-awareness. And if you do, then there'll be a natural and organic maturity as time goes on. But you can go a lot deeper into that, and you can accelerate that by engaging in personal development activities, healing work, inner child work, thinking about what is my history, what are the traumas that I took out of childhood, what are my triggers. If I'm genuinely living from a place where I do not feel a deep sense of confidence in myself, or my confidence in myself is conditional, in which case it's not confidence, it's bullshit. Where is that hole coming from? And so the ability to confront oneself is the greatest aptitude that any leader can have, because your ability to look in the mirror and your ability to learn how to witness yourself more objectively and more truthfully will determine your ability to work on the parts of yourself and develop the parts of yourself that aren't yet healed or aren't yet integrated or aren't yet fully developed. And that's where your biggest gains are going to be. And so what happened in my leadership journey is the more that I did that, the more I developed authentic confidence. And it's not, I don't even see it as confidence. It's more like self-acceptance. And so today, if you were to speak to my team, what they would tell you is that I'm more present. I'm a lot more grounded. I can have what others might think as difficult or confronting conversations pretty easily because I'm just coming from a place of being deeply centered and heartfelt, and people can feel the intention with which I'm bringing into the room. And so you want to get to a point where it's no longer about I'm the boss, but I'm not really, because I'm shying away from being a fucking leader if we really scrape below the surface, to developing yourself where you own your rank and power, where you own yourself and can now have the conversations necessary, and you can do it compassionately and you can have them elegantly. And now people actually start to respect you as a fucking leader because you're fucking leading.
I think it's interesting. Like, I've been really lucky to be able to interview and talk with amazing leaders, through this podcast. And the one thing that I've noticed is great leaders can be really strong in moments when they need to be, but they never lack empathy. And I'm like, that's one of the things that has really stood out for me. And it kind of comes back to your point of like, you have to be confident in yourself, because if there's an insecurity there that you haven't accepted yet, that's going to come out in those moments. And that's where that arrogance comes out. That's where that feeling of the need to put someone else down so that I still regain this power stance, or this kind of level of power that I need to mask that insecurity that you were just talking about. And, you often hear business owners, and I know I've said this a million times over, having those tough conversations is the hardest thing, right? And that's something that nearly every small business owner will say, because you haven't built the confidence yet, and we haven't built the confidence yet, and going through that process. And it kind of rings true with what you said. It's a mixture of, self-acceptance, which will lead to the right type of confidence and not arrogance.
Yeah.
But also still being able to have empathy for your people, because, true leadership is not a title you put on yourself.
Right.
It's a feeling that you give your people. There's no lying there. Yes. People either want to work for you and they want to drive the ship forward for you, or they don't.
Yeah.
And that's really, that's the determinant. That's what determines, what great leadership is. And I feel like that definitely rings true with what you just said there.
100%.
Is that, it's.
And there's something that comes up for me as we talk about developing confidence. Is my concern is that a lot of people misinterpret what I mean when I say that, because there's ways of developing external and conditional confidence that is not really authentic to oneself. And so developing confidence is not writing down all your achievements and getting high on how awesome you are and overcoming imposter syndrome and, doing some of the external stuff to get myself into a powerful state where I am confident. I think that's part of the problem, that approach to developing confidence. Real confidence, an authentic confidence, comes from understanding your life's journey up until now, understanding what happened within and around me from the age of 0 to 18.
This is so true.
What are some of the stuff that I carry that is still unresolved, that's showing up in destructive patterns throughout my life? And one of those patterns might be I lack confidence. One of the patterns might be I treat my partner a certain way. One of the patterns might be I drink too often. One of the patterns might be I procrastinate. Every single pattern that we demonstrate comes from childhood. And so developing authentic confidence is about resolving childhood trauma. And when I use the word trauma, again, sometimes that can be misinterpreted. People immediately start thinking of extreme trauma. And that's not what trauma is. No. trauma can be the smallest things. Trauma can be you're in a supermarket with your mum, you stubbed your toe, you reached out to mum, mum didn't hear that you were crying, she didn't see you, she turned, she grabbed something off the shelf. The 6-year-old, you interpreted that as I'm not lovable and I'm abandoned in this moment, and somewhere you're still carrying that abandonment wound. The reason why our formative years are so incredibly formative over who we are today and our patterns today, thought patterns, behavioral patterns, speech patterns, is from 0 to 7, we call that the imprint period, right? Psychology calls that the imprint period, which is everything that is said, everything that is modeled to you is going straight into your unconscious mind.
Yep.
And you don't yet have the cognitive filters to filter it. You don't yet have perspective to understand what's going on. You don't yet have context or information. It doesn't matter whether you believe you had the perfect parents and the perfect childhood. If you haven't done the work to go back and heal and understand what went on for you during that period, then there is unresolved trauma playing out in your life right now. And that's where a lack of confidence comes from. And when you start to do the work to review your history and understand your traumas and understand your triggers and understand your patterns and become more conscious around all of that, you don't even think about confidence anymore. You're just you.
That's the key, in my opinion. Like, I can look back at chapters in my life and went through some really tough mental health issues. And the thing that, mental health is really it's a beast, right? But the thing that, I'd never eradicated it. Everybody goes through it, in my opinion.
Yep.
But I went and spoke to someone about things that I'd never spoken to anyone about, even my parents.
Yes.
Right? And I did that for 6 months.
Right.
And it didn't get rid of the mental health. It just allowed me to accept myself.
Right.
And you know what? Prior to having those that conversation with, someone who was a professional,
yes,
it was like, I had no idea why I felt the way I did.
Yes.
And then that's what that comes out in every single interaction
element
I
of
have,
yourself and interaction with others.
With everyone. And then, this is like the ego in you. I thought I'd clocked the world after that and found a confidence in myself. And then it's funny, I went, meditation was big for me through that time and all of that. And I went and did a 7-day silent retreat.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn something about yourself, go and do one of those. It was weird. Like the first 2 days I was like, oh, don't really know what I'm doing. Like blah, blah, blah. You're just in your own head. And then, I remember day 4, I just cried the whole day, but I had no idea really why I was crying for the first 6 hours. But then I started to realize it was the same. It was, it was a very similar experience, but instead of someone else having those conversations with me, I started just having them with myself because there's nothing else to do. Like I was in a jungle, you know what I mean? And it was the same type of feeling. It was like I realized all the things that I was masking. And instead of it being, this was now more around business and business taking away elements of, or me feeling like business had to take away from all these other parts of my life, like family, relationships, and these kind of things, and had this realization. And the point is I can look back at these kind of times in my life where I was able to take this next step because I spent a lot of time doing that, as you said, inner work and that conscious, and that's forever. There's no end game there.
End to that.
You know what I mean? So I can definitely resonate with that just on a personal level.
As your masks and your identities fall away, what comes up for you is whatever was there. And so when you say on day 4, I spent the whole day crying, my entire body filled with joy, because that is the most beautiful release of stored energy and emotion that one can experience. And every emotion, unless you have processed it out, every emotion that you have ever felt is currently stored in your body. And how do we move it out?
True.
Meditation, yoga, therapy, processing, somatic work.
It's literally all I did for, it was wake up at 4 a.m., meditate for an hour and a half, yoga for an hour and a half, go for a walk, eat lunch, after lunch, you come back, you do yoga for another hour, you do another meditation session, you then eat dinner, and you're in bed by 7 o'clock.
Right.
No phones, no nothing.
So that's a brilliant example. I said before that the number one thing a leader can do is confront themselves and go to the uncomfortable places with themselves. That is a exceptional example of doing exactly that. Because I tell you what most people do. I feel sad. I feel not confident. I feel like there's something wrong. What do? I distract myself. I pick up my phone. I pour a glass of wine. I start chasing people of the opposite sex. I start binging Netflix. Now, none of those things are bad things. It's not a bad thing to have your phone. It's not a bad thing to, sex certainly isn't a bad thing. Having the occasional wine isn't a bad thing. It's not about the things. It's about your relationship with them. Why are you reaching for your phone? Are you reaching for your phone because functionally you need to send an email? Or are you reaching for your phone because there's a hole at the pit of your stomach that you're trying to mask and run away from? And so when most people feel uncomfortable or feel like there's something that's unresolved in ourselves, we distract ourselves. When what we should be doing is exactly what you did. It's exactly what I've been doing for the last 15 years, which is sitting in deep presence with self, and sometimes sitting in deep presence with a group in a meditation retreat, or sitting in deep presence with a professional, to look at and to honor what is fundamentally true for us under the surface. Well, the bigger your mission in life, the more the universe will reflect back to you where you are underdeveloped or unresolved or unhealed. And the reason for that is the larger your world is, right? If you just go to a job every day that there's not a lot of sense of mission there, you're just doing your job, and then you go home and you have dinner and you have a glass of wine and you watch TV. There's not a lot of opportunity for the universe to reflect back to you where your growth edges are and where you may be unresolved. You're just living unconsciously in a hypnosis of disempowerment, not knowing that you're not your optimal self and probably never will. And so when you're a business owner or anybody with a mission, and this can be someone in a career as well, but there's somebody in a career that's wishing to grow and fulfill their potential. So it doesn't matter what you do, but when you're somebody with a mission and you're striving and you're trying to get better, you start getting people reporting into you. That's a huge personal development opportunity. That's a huge mirror. Your business starts to grow. That's a huge mirror. Let's say you're in a career. You go to your manager or your leader and you say, what are my weaknesses? What are my biggest opportunities? That's a huge mirror. You go to your peers. You go to therapy. You go sit in fucking silence for 7 days. That's a mirror, right? The larger your mission in life, the more mirrors you will have around you that will reflect back to you where you are yet to be developed to the fullest degree that you possibly could. And that means that a lot of the time you're going to need to be really comfortable coming up against your own inadequacy. And when I say inadequacy, I don't mean inadequate relative to anybody else. I mean, there is an ideal you and there is the current you. And your world will mirror back to you where you are not yet the highest and fullest expression of yourself. And most people think that's uncomfortable. I think that's fucking magical, and I don't want to live any other way.
I feel like everyone who's watching this, and even myself right now, I'm going, ain't that the truth? You know what I mean? Like, it's so true. And I think it's so relatable because we all experience it, you know what I mean? And I think it's, often that can be the part of business. It's not just a business principle. It's, it's life. But I feel like as business owners, that can be the thing that gets tucked under the blanket or pushed to the wayside often. And I know for me, like even now, I'm thinking about. I'm like, I need to get back and kind of start doing more of this. Now. But it's one of those things that I can look back and. That 7-day silent retreat was still the most profound experience I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think it cost me $50 a night.
Right.
Like, $50 a night it was, and it was amazing. And
For Passion is a good one as well, and you literally pay what you want. So you can pay, you're there for 10 days in silence, you can pay $50, you can pay $500, you can pay $5. But yeah, I mean, the opportunities to do this work are everywhere. You just need to lean into them.
So true. So we're rolling into our last segment now, which is quick fire.
Awesome.
Now, so I got to preface this because every time I say it, like some people, they'll say 5 words and think they can't say anything over that. It's really no different to kind of, any other question that I ask.
Yep.
They're just a little bit more broad and kind of cover a different range of topics. So question 1 is, what's one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
This is different to what I would have said a couple of years ago. The advice I would give to my younger self would be to go back and examine your upbringing for all of the richness and the nutrients that it could offer your development and healing.
So similar to what we just talked about there, is going back and doing the work constantly, do you think? Do you think it's something that needs to be constant?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you can hear me sigh as I think about that. So here's the thing, man. What's trauma? Trauma is too fast, too much, too soon. Something's happening and too much, too fast, too soon. That's what trauma is. You don't want to take the same approach to your healing. Too much, too fast, too soon. And people like you and I, entrepreneurs, we're really good at too much, too fast, too soon.
Yeah, literally.
We're really good. Like, it's our default position. And so, I often have coaches, therapists. I've got a coach for nutrition. I've got a coach for training. I've got coaches for life stuff. I've got therapists for inner child work. And so I did probably a couple of years of therapy on the inner child stuff, and then I went and recently spent a couple of weeks in Arizona at a institution called the Rio Retreat Center. And it was 2 one-week courses, different courses, but back-to-back. One was on inner child stuff, and the other was very similar, but perhaps more advanced and a bit deeper. And I did them both back-to-back. Now, these are, you're in a room with 6 people. These are really intense programs. And I came back for week 2, and I think it was the Tuesday of the second week, and somebody, because you form a really strong bond with the people that you're going through these processes with, and someone in my group said to the, because we kept joking that I was back for a second week, so I was a sucker for punishment, and someone said to our therapist, the facilitator, how many people have done 2 weeks in a row? And she kind of like tried not to laugh, and she kind of smirked and looked at me and nodded, as if to say,
you're the only one.
I'm the only one. These guys have been around since the 60s. No one's ever done 2 weeks back to back. And I learned in the second week why nobody's done 2 weeks. I went to 0 real quick on week 2 because it's just so much for your physiology and neurology and your nervous system to process. And so I came out of that second week being really resolved and really confident in my decision of, I don't want to fucking speak to a therapist. I don't want to fucking see a coach. I am not getting in another classroom for who knows how long, but it might be 6 or 12 months. And I needed to pause, because there's doing the work, there's doing the therapy, there's doing the coaching, there's doing the courses, and then there's allowing space for integration. And so, while yes, it will be an ongoing journey that hopefully one engages in for their entire life, that's not to say that it needs to be front of mind 24/7. You do need to pause and live and integrate.
Oh, a session with a therapist feels like you've played 6 football games.
Right.
Like you walk out of it and you're just drained. You know what I mean? So I 100% agree. I think it's a good point. I think it's a constant, but it's not, it's not intensely constant, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
It's something that you can kind of revisit, when you need it, if that makes sense, and you just make sure that it's front of mind.
Exactly.
All right, so this is an interesting one, but I'm interested. I think it's going to relate a little bit. But what's one piece of advice you would give to young men who lack self-confidence?
You need to go back and integrate the parts of yourself that are unhealed. It's the same
It's
answer.
the same answer. Yeah, I thought it would
It's
be.
the same answer.
Yeah.
You know, I had a retreat recently in Byron Bay. We had, 80 of our clients there. These are serious business owners. We probably had across the 80s probably, I don't know, $400 million in annualized revenue in that group. And I did a session with them over a couple of days on inner child work and how that pertains to other areas of your life. And, a couple of times we started to talk about, okay, so the inner child work and healing me and developing me is good, but what about in relationships? Mm. And the answer is it starts and ends with self. Okay, but what about, that's hearing my inner child, but what about as a parent? It starts and ends with self.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about in my business? It starts and ends with self.
Yeah, literally.
And so there's no escaping the perhaps inconvenient truth that the more whole and healed you are, the more resonant you will be with everybody else and in every area and aspect of your life.
So true. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting a business or about to start a business?
Once you have a degree of product to market fit, meaning people want to buy your stuff, spend 80% of your time on marketing and sales. Just have a relentless focus on revenue generating activities.
And so, and that's obviously revenue generating activities come back to that marketing, sales,
yes.
Getting in front of people, creating attention.
Yes.
Amazing. All right, so what's the most important trait that a founder must have for success and why?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I think the first one is a growth mindset, the ability to look at oneself and develop oneself, particularly when you don't like what you see. The more confronting and the more uncomfortable, the more excited you should get because the greater the opportunity. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The second thing is communication is fundamentally important to any leader, right? And so consciously developing your communication skills is fundamentally important. And then third is the ability to continue to reinvent yourself. As your business grows, it goes through different stages and phases, no different to that of a human being, right? We're in infancy, we're in childhood, we're in adolescence, we're a teenager, we're in early adulthood, we're in adulthood, we're in older age. Every stage of life requires a different you. The same is true of your business. And so understand that this is a growth journey that is led by you.
I wholeheartedly agree with all three of those. From talking from experience, that I've found all of those really important and still do to this day.
Yeah.
So the last one is, what's the biggest opportunity for businesses over the next 12 months?
To do well the basics and the fundamentals that will differentiate you in any market over any 12-month period. And let me explain what I mean by that. I was talking to some accountants yesterday, and I was saying that, throughout COVID, our clients outperformed the market by 310%. I'll give you an example. We had all of our clients that were in retail had their biggest months through COVID. It's like, Jack, retail was shut during COVID. How did they have their biggest months? And the answer is, like, if we take Aqua Gardening, for example, they bricks and mortar store that sell gardening stuff so that anybody can become their own gardener in their own home, in their own garden. And bricks and mortar store always wanted to go online, never did, because they were busy in their core business, but kind of had this desire to go online. They're doing $150,000 a month in their bricks and mortar store. COVID comes, restrictions hit, they have to close their doors. Their first reaction is, we're gone. This business is over. They reach out to their Elevate coach. We have that conversation. We strategize that we can pivot everything online. We can take the people that man their store currently, they can become the phone support line. And so customers that are shopping online, if they want to chat to anyone, they can click something, chat to somebody. So your staff are doing the same thing. They're just doing it digitally. And we're now going to do this online pivot. And so we needed to optimize the website, drive traffic to the website, and have sales support for the website. We did that within 7 days. In the month where these guys should have been shutting the doors for their company, they had their biggest month ever. They tripled their revenue. They went from doing 150 grand a month to doing 450 grand a month in the first week of lockdowns.
Wow.
First month of lockdowns. And so what I was saying to the accountants yesterday was, I actually think for business owners in a strictly commercial environment, I'm talking now, things like COVID and things like recessions are really good for us, because they force innovation. They force you to get the basics and the fundamentals well. They force you to grow, right? And so the things that are going to be most prevalent and opportunistic for business owners over the next 12 months are the same things that were opportunistic and prevalent for business owners over the last 12 months and the 12 months prior to that, which is build a fucking great company. That's the game. Doesn't matter what the fucking circumstances are. It's not about circumstances, it's about strategy. It's not about environment, it's about execution. Build a great company, and then you become agnostic to the economic environment.
That's so interesting. I 100% agree. I think, I've always thought about it like, hey, what do we need to do to get through this? Because if we get through it, we're going to have the best 10 years ever.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
100%.
It's like, so the key is to get through it, you're going to have to really make some bold decisions. And
Yes.
you're going to have to come back to, what you said, these fundamentals, but be able to read the environment and see how the fundamentals apply to the current environment. If you can do that, as I said, on the back end of this,
Yes.
when the economy's pumping, you're going to prove that you can get through a recession.
Yes.
That's going to build morale in the company, and then it's, you got some huge room for growth afterwards as well.
And the needing to make bold decisions, even if those decisions are really hard and really uncomfortable, making bold decisions and making hard decisions in the absence of perfect information is a skill just like anything else. And so if COVID or a recession forces an entrepreneur to make more bold decisions over a 12-month period than what you would over a 12-year period, then talking strictly from the perspective of your personal and professional growth, that was the best 12 months that you've had.
100%.
And so everything that it forces are just the behaviors and the capabilities that we should be developing and demonstrating anyway.
So true. Yeah, 100%. I think that's something that goes it's very, look, we have all gone through it. It's very hard to recognize that the skills you're building in real time right now will pay a dividend later in those tough moments. But that's what makes you a great operator and a great entrepreneur.
100%. Yeah. When the government changed so in 2015 we became a college and we started offering diplomas and advanced diplomas and stuff. So what we've always done at the Entourage, what we do today is we work with existing business owners that are either doing 7 figures and above. They do our Elevate coaching program. If they're doing below $1 million, they do our Accelerate coaching program. Existing business owners who are really good at what they do, want to build a commercially scalable model around what they do. In 2015, we became a college offering diplomas because we had a lot of students reaching out to us and parents reaching out to us going, little Jimmy's finishing high school next year, can he come and start at the Entourage? And so we became a registered training organisation, went into that environment and did so very successfully to the point where we ended up building an institution around it. Government changed the regulations 12 months into that. We were 12 months into becoming a college. The government changed the regulations, and so with 3 months' notice. So what that meant for us is that we were losing about $500,000 or $600,000 a month. We were 3 months away from losing $800,000 a month. We needed to go from 90 people down to 40 people, and that still didn't see us back into a profitability position. It was the hardest. Like 2016, 17, 18, and half of 19 was the hardest 3.5 years of my life. And it made me so significantly better as an entrepreneur, as an operator, as a CEO, as a financial manager, as a risk manager, as a people leader, as a people manager, as a partner, as a son, as a friend, as a human. It was really challenging for years. And I don't think I've ever said this before, but I think I can say it now. It's one of the best things that ever happened. I don't want to go through it again, And given that I've got the lessons from it, hopefully I don't. But if I did need to go through it again, it wouldn't be as taxing because I've developed those skills now.
Yeah, to get through it. Amazing, mate. We're going to wrap it up there. I want to say a massive thank you to you. That was amazing. I think you've got a lot of wisdom. You've been in business a long time and you're doing amazing things, not even just on a business front, but what that business is doing for society and the opportunities it's creating for business owners, around Australia and the world. So really appreciative for your time as well. I know obviously you're extremely busy, so a massive thank you for coming on the show. For everybody who may not know you, where can they find you and where can they find out more about the Entourage?
Instagram's best for me, so just at Jack Delosa on Instagram, DELOSA, at Jack Delosa, and then Entourage is just the-entourage.com.
Amazing. Definitely check it out. A big thank you to everyone who tuned in. Again, just the support that we're getting at the moment. I just want to say a massive thank you to you guys. The comments, the likes, the shares, you tuning in, the 5-star ratings, which you have actually been pumping at the moment, which is amazing. A big thank you, because it makes a massive difference to us and allows us to do what we love. And lastly, Johnny boy, thanks for putting this together, my man. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine.